Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the collection Static Shock: Trial by Fire, collecting the first 4 issues of the 1993 series. In the early 90s, it seemed like the comics market was exploding, and that was helped along by the ever-growing appearance of indie publishers, especially those like Image, Malibu, and Milestone that were attempting to make their own connected universes to compete with DC and Marvel. The last of those I listed, Milestone, is especially notable because it tried to focus on something literally nobody else was focusing on at the time: inclusion. That inclusion could be seen in a few ways, but mostly it focused on black heroes with black side characters, something incredibly rare to see in comics at the time, and honestly is still rare enough these days that comics featuring such a cast are considered noteworthy. It also came in who was working on the comics being published, like Milestone co-founders Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cohen, who created the original character designs for Static. McDuffie was set to write the series, but as he was already writing the titles Hardware, Icon, and Blood Syndicate, he decided he couldn't write a 4th title and so hired Robert L. Washington III to come co-write the first 4 issues of the series before taking over, with art by John Paul Leon. Together the three would create the sensation that would be called Static at the time, but after the animated series launched him into stardom, the property would become better known as Static Shock. Which is why this collection of the first 4 issues of the series called Static is given a different name. So let's find out together just how different and humble Static's origins are from the one you might know as we take this away. The comic opens on Static kicking the butts of some wannabe gangstas at the local arcade, a location intended to be a regular feature in the Static comics. You see, kids, in the early 90s, the latest games came in these weird giant cabinets, and if you wanted to play them, you had to go down to a physical location that would purchase them and make them available to people to play, and then you would have to pay to play in quarters. Cause, you see, kiddies, in the early 90s, money came in physical forms, like quarters. Can you imagine? Anyway, the thugs are here for this young lady named Frida, and Static also finds it important to defend her, which should tell you that she might just be an important character. For now, Static simply rescues her by wowing everyone there with his crazy lightning powers and all they can do. Like how he can float by standing on a metal disc, in this case a sewer lid, and using the electromagnetic properties of lightning to essentially fly. Or how he can protect himself from blows by creating a literal static field around his body, a force field he can also use to deliver a high voltage taser punch. I love that the creators created so many cool ways for Static's powers to manifest themselves, especially basing them on real scientific ideas rather than him just being guy who shoots lightning bolts. After taking out the bad guy, Static flies off home so that he can be there by the time Frida gets home and calls him, since, remember, this was the dark ages before cell phones. Seriously, what did people do all day? Since the comic kicked off with some action, now it takes the time to slow down and give us a glimpse into the personal life of our main character, Virgil Hawkins. That name, by the way, is a reference to a real-life person with the same name who spent his entire life trying to become a lawyer but was constantly being denied because of the color of his skin. And his lifelong fight to do this led to a number of systematic changes across Florida. Because, of course, it was Florida. What's wrong with you, Florida? Virgil lives with his mom and his sister, and I think his dad is mentioned, but I don't really recall seeing him at any point. Interestingly, Virg was supposed to have 2 sisters, but the second sister somehow never manifested into the final comic. So when the New 52 comic went a little sister-sister with the sister clone, that may have been a nod to this sibling lost in development. We also see him hanging out at school with his small group of friends that include Frida, of course, the cool rich kid Larry, and Rick Stone, who we won't really see in these 4 issues beyond this moment here where they're making fun of him for doing ballet. Though, obviously, they'd never really think he was gay because of that. Ha, ha, ha. That would be ridiculous. Except he is gay. We don't learn that here, but he does eventually come out in the series. He was also supposed to be gay in the animated series, but my understanding is the network wouldn't allow there to be an openly gay character in a kids show. Because could you imagine? They might think being gay was okay or normal or something. Dear God, man! But in response, McDuffie and the show's creators just left all the subtext there to allow viewers to draw their own conclusions. which is admittedly pretty fucking awesome. We quickly get back to the action as another of those yellow-jacketed wearing 5-alarm crew gang members show up to the school to kidnap Frida at gunpoint. But Static follows them, somewhat embarrassingly on a metal garbage can since there wasn't a manhole cover lying around, to their gang leader, a guy calling himself Hotstreak. Hotstreak has super speed and can throw fireballs, so maybe he can be Ryu clone number 5006 for the next Street Fighter game. But those credentials don't impress Static, who can pretty much shrug off everything Hotstreak throws at him. Until the moment Static gets a good look at Hotstreak's face, which prompts him to immediately curl into a ball and start crying for mercy? What? Nobody's that ugly, Static. Streaker here is about as disappointed in the fight as the reader is bound to be, leading to him simply dismissing both Static and Frida and telling them he simply never wants to see either of them ever again. After he leaves, Frida attempts to comfort Static and pulls off his mask to see how badly beat up he is and discovers that he's actually her good pal, Virgil. Which means it's time for a flashback! So now we find ourselves back in time before Virgil had his superpowers on the day that he met Frida for the first time. And that meeting begins with Virgil telling a joke with the punchline, "No soap, radio." Haha, it's funny cause, no soap, radio. Larry doesn't get it, but Frida seems to get it, saying she doesn't normally enjoy ethnic humor, but that Cardassian jokes are a new frontier. Now, I know I'm here primarily just to summarize comics and make jokes, and occasionally go on far too long-winded political diatribes that you all wish I wouldn't make, and that's fair, but I do it anyway because I can't really help it, because that's the way my brain works, and if you're not here for how my brain works, then I'm not really sure what you're doing here, but actually I am really glad that you're here, because otherwise I'd just be talking to a big empty void, and what's the point of that? So maybe I really should be listening to you guys, but anyway, where was I? Oh, right. But can I just take a moment to appreciate just how much work this tiny little bit of dialogue exchange does? Cause seriously. For those as confused as Larry, No Soap Radio is a sort of intellectual thought experiment on social pressures to conform. It's a punchline that's supposed to not make sense with the joke, despite the fact that you, like Virgil, will laugh hysterically after saying it. And theoretically you'll have a Confederate who would laugh along with you, with the idea that any third party listening in will give one of two reactions. The first is to also laugh with you, because they cave to peer pressure and want to be seen as being in on the joke. The second is, like Larry, to simply admit that you don't get it. So in case you've missed the hints from earlier dialogue about Larry having money and having had actual dates, what we're being told here is Larry is a cool guy. He doesn't care about peer pressure, he's his own person. And while he may not be the smartest or best informed guy in the school, he knows what he doesn't know and he's willing to own up to it. And though they pay no attention to it, we also see Rick in the background laughing along with Virgil, though we don't really know from here if he's the Confederate or if he caved to the overwhelming pressure to fit in. But Frida actually has a third reaction. She gets what Virgil is doing, but not only that, she actually jumps in on it, topping his joke with an extremely nerdy reference to Star Trek, mentioning the Cardassian race, which had only just come into existence a couple years before this, while also saying New Frontier to pay homage to the space, the Final Frontier line that opened every episode. This shows us that Frida is even cooler than Larry is, at least for a clearly nerdy guy like Virgil, who, yes, clearly falls immediately in love with her when this is her response. And seriously, those 3 sentences of dialogue did what it took me 4 paragraphs to explain. And even if you don't know the No Soap or the Cardassian reference, you still subconsciously kinda get that all of that is what's happening here. So that's just pretty amazing. Anyway, a thug calling himself Biz Money B, because he clearly has all the cleverness of that Hotstreak guy. Hey, I wonder if he is Hotstreak. Starts hitting on Frida, but she blows him off while Virgil comments from the peanut gallery. Biz Money doesn't appreciate Virgil's comments though and beats the crap out of him until Larry intercedes and walks him out of there. Larry then tells Virgil that if he lets dudes like that walk all over him without a strong response with a gun of all things, like, damn, Larry, I thought you were supposed to be cool, man. Then they'll just keep on doing it, and high school is going to be a very long 4 years. He's not really wrong, but still, come on, man. No guns. radio. It only gets worse when Virgil gets home and his mom compares him to the failures of his father, something no teen boy likes to hear, let me tell ya. And still more so when Frida calls him up to be like, yeah, bullies know to pick on the nerds and that's why they picked on you. Ouch. She's not really wrong, but still, ouch. So Virgil goes back to Larry to get a piece, and then heads to Paris Island where Biz Money B and his fellow Yellow Jacket cronies and a bunch of other gangsters are all about to have a big gang war. But before that can get started, Virgil's ready to straight up gun Big Money down in cold blood. In the end though, Virgil decides he's no killer and can't go through with it, but then suddenly finds himself being attacked by some cops who had shown up to stop the gang war, and gets knocked out by a sleeping gas that they had sprayed across the island. When he wakes up, he sees what appears to be Biz Money and all his homies lying dead, and a person turned into a brick wall. He also finds himself having electric powers now, which he uses to fry the weird robotic suits of the cops that are still hunting him, and take a sewer lid sky slide out of there. This event, by the way, becomes referred to as the Big Bang, because it's what kicked off many members of the Milestone connected universe having superpowers. Mostly the superpowered gang, the Blood Syndicate. Virgil would then start doing some bodybuilding and training with his powers until he made his debut as Static, which more or less catches everyone up to the story so far. So when Hotstreak unsurprisingly turned out to be Biz Money B, someone Static thought was dead, Static was so shocked that he reverted back to the person he was the first time Biz Money beat him up. But now that he's had time to recover from the revelation, he's ready to face down Hotstreak again. This time he traps the speedster in place, realizing that Hotstreak uses the heat friction from his fast movement to create the fire that he throws. Without being able to throw away the heat, he can't move fast, and without being able to move fast, he can't create the heat. So adequately put in his place, he agrees to never attack Static or any of his friends ever again. But taking out Hotstreak has only garnered Static the attention of a shadowy figure. And shadowy figures are never good news. Don't ever trust people who refuse to turn on lights in their own homes. They're clearly sick people. So a guy calling himself Tarmac starts showing up to places Static has been seen to try and call him out for a fight. First, that's the arcade, which, by the way, is called Akkad's, which I love because it's a reference to the lost city of Akkad, founded by Sargon the Great as the capital of the first empire in human history. Yes, I am a nerd, but clearly so was Dwayne McDuffie. Next, Tarmac attacks a park, and here Static actually runs into him and fights him. But when Tarmac throws a car at civilians, Static leaves the fight to rescue them. Deciding that the presence of bystanders will make the fight too annoying, Tarmac tells Static to meet him at the mall parking lot after midnight so they can duke it out, just the two of them. Frida realizes this is a trap, because of course it is, but that just makes Virgil feel like he has to defend his alter ego, leading to a pretty awkward argument between the pair that feels way too personal and that should really have clued all his friends into the fact that they knew something they weren't saying, because superheroes are really bad at hiding their secret identities. What's up with that? Eventually, Static realizes Frida's right, but feeling he still has to face the villain, decides to come extra prepared. This comes in the form of him welding together a metal fan that he can fold to carry with him so that he always has a flying disc. It also comes in the form of a dummy he uses as a distraction, although he doesn't really use it to get a drop on Tarmac, so not entirely sure why he bothered with that. Lastly, it comes in the form of him bringing some dry ice and liquid oxygen in order to freeze Tarmac. Wait, where the hell did he get liquid oxygen? With the villain fully frozen, Static then adds some insult to injury by freaking rolling over him with a steamroller. Jeez. Wait, where did he get a steamroller? Static, what you be doing in your off time, man? The fight is then put to a full stop by the appearance of Holocaust, which is a pretty f***ed up name for a character, I don't care who you are. Holocaust is one of the major figures to come out of the Big Bang and a former member of the Blood Syndicate. He was also the shadowy figure from earlier, and he's here now because he's starting to build his own criminal empire, and has decided that he could really use Static as an enforcer. He tempts the young man with money, power, and, of course, girls. All he has to do to earn all of that is help him shake down a mobster at his home. Static is reasonably suspicious of the offer though, so he goes to see Frida for some advice on the matter, only to discover that the girl of his dreams is dating his best pal Larry. Not sure if this was supposed to be a revelation to the reader as well, cause honestly it was pretty obvious. Everyone saw it but Static. Larry even tried to warn Virgil earlier when Static expressed interest to him about dating Frida. Oh well. Feeling betrayed, Static goes home to pout, only to end up getting yelled at by his mom again because he got fired from his day job earlier due to leaving work to rescue the people injured in Tarmac's attack on Acads. All of this has convinced Static to take the job from Holocaust after all. But when the would-be mob boss starts threatening the actual mob boss's family, Static realizes he can't be a part of this affair, and the two fight for a bit before Static leaves for home again. Once back, he receives a visit from Larry, who explains that they didn't reveal their relationship status to Virgil because Frida didn't want to risk their friendship. And Virgil's mom stops in to make sure his new job doesn't involve him being a hooligan, cause she raised him better than that. The comic ends with Virgil metaphorically accepting his relationship with Frida by begrudgingly accepting a call from her. And that brings us all the way to the breakdown. It's clear that McDuffie was going for a Spider-Man style with this comic, and he very much achieved it. You've got the nerdy main character who was bullied in school, but an accident then gave him superpowers. You've got the small band of friends that keep appearing as side characters, including the girl he pines after despite her dating one of the other characters. You have the hero struggling and failing to balance his personal life with his superhero life. You have all the snarky, smart-mouth quips that he makes while being a superhero. And you even have Static saying, "I bet hardware never has these problems," a direct callback to how Spider-Man always used to say things like, "I bet the Fantastic Four never have money problems." You also have the way he solves his problems with science! Oh wait, I think I mean science, bitch? That's better. Using his book smarts to outwit his enemies. And the comic does all of this without making the comic feel like it was trying to be a comic from the 70s. Or even one from the 90s. Honestly, of all the 90s comics I've read, this one feels like one of the least dated. Sure, you have the styles, the art, and the telephones that clearly date it to the 90s, but it doesn't have writing that makes it feel unrelatable or outdated. It's very easy to see why this comic would prove so popular and why Static would go on to continue to make waves in the superhero community and become the lasting sensation that he has. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of high. It's great fun and a good story, and if you're a Static fan by any stretch of the imagination, then reading these classics should be a no-brainer. The collected edition gets 1 5-alarm crew patch, which is mostly a bad thing. I do greatly appreciate that it comes with an introduction from Dwayne McDuffie himself, but beyond that, this collection is a bit of a letdown. It only collects 4 issues of the 45-issue series, and the covers don't appear between the issues, but instead in a cover gallery at the back, which is something that always bothers me personally, but maybe I'm weird. There are no other bonuses whatsoever, and sadly, there don't appear to be any other collections for this series. You really need to step up your game, DC, cause this here ain't cutting it. Thanks everybody for watching. I didn't exactly want to cover this since, as I said, there don't seem to be further collections of this series, and I really enjoyed covering full series at once. But after the success of last year's Static video, it seemed to me that you guys might be hungry for more Static, so I'm just gonna try and cover what I can of him. In that vein, I really hope you enjoyed this video, because I really enjoyed making it. And if I did bring you any kind of value or fun or anything like that, then I hope you click that like button and the subscribe button, and I hope to see you next time, right here, in the Comic Cave.